Consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Introduce.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Hey, consider going to mypillow.com right now and get your pet a pet bed, just like my beloved Delta has right here in my office. Not only can you get pet beds, but you can get sheets, towels, blankets, and so much more. Slippers, sandals, robes, beach towels. It just goes on and on. But please go to mypillow.com and be sure to use the promo code B66. When you do, not only will you receive savings, but a generous percentage of each purchase comes back to continue supporting this 24/7 free broadcast outlet. We need your support. Hey, look, we're entrepreneurs, just like my friend Mike Lindell. We all need your support, and you're getting quality products at the same time. So please go to mypillow.com and use the promo code B66. Mike always has amazing specials going right there at MyPillow. So check out whatever those specials might be today. You never know. Mike's always changing it up and making new offers right there at mypillow.com.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Civilization is a very fragile thing. And in the Western world, particularly in the United States, it's been unraveling as the left and their allies on the courts have intentionally and deliberately facilitated the mass migration of criminal illegal aliens into our communities. These are people who are murdering and raping and pillaging American citizens on American soil. A country that was once the zenith of civilization, America, increasingly resembles the third world and is reverting to barbarism, as Ms. Romero's testimony so poignantly underscores. And instead of fighting for the preservation of our communities and the integrity of our nation's sovereignty, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to keep alien terrorists within our borders. And it's so many times district court judges are leading the charge. And I think that Judge Boasberg is an excellent example of that.
Rogue judges, vetting of appointees, patience is running out with the FBI and money laundering. And welcome to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Well, that's right, folks. Rogue judges continue to attack President Trump's clear Article 2 powers, such as managing personnel in the executive branch and huge national security policies that help keep us safe. I know not everyone agrees with Laura Loomer, but she's been doing yeoman's work using her research team to expose vetting weaknesses in the administration's appointee process that need to be addressed. Look, this is a serious challenge for getting the things we voted for accomplished, so that's got to be fixed. And then there's the perceived lack of progress at national security state apparatus agencies, especially the FBI. Having worked in the federal government for over 30 years, I do get it. The director and deputy director at the FBI have only been in place a short time, and they need time to work the big things, but doing stuff like promoting the leader of the nationwide manhunt for January 6th grandmas? Come on, man. We need to see progress and accountability. The Epstein perps, the Trump assassins, and tracking down Islamist terrorists, cartel terrorists, and Chinese military-age male illegals that are in the country are all things we expect to see major progress on, and fast. Finally, the last segment's going to be great. The political money laundering seems to continue relentlessly with almost no investigations. Act Blue and USAID are only a couple of examples. Well, my guest today to discuss all this is Stephen M. Abramowitz. Steve is CEO and editor of the HeartlandJournal.com and host of the Heartland Journal podcast. The Heartland Journal is the original hometown print newspaper for Mill Creek, Washington, founded by an 82nd Airborne Army veteran dedicated to truth and patriotism. Steve, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, Colonel. Thanks for having me. Thank you for your service. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's Tuesday, and I've been wanting to do a show like this for a long time. And when the folks reached out to me and I said, hey, does he want to talk about anything specifically? They gave me a list. So this is great. I love it. I appreciate you coming on. But tell the folks a little bit more about HeartlandJournal.com. I know that you took it over after the founder passed away, unfortunately, and you're doing some great things with it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he passed away at a terrible time in the history of the United States. He survived being 82nd Airborne World War II, but couldn't handle COVID in the state of Washington and had to basically die alone in a hospital because they wouldn't honor visitation rights for his spouse. And so whether he was on remdesivir, whether he was on an incubator, we'll never know because they won't tell us. But unbeknownst to me at the time, he was asked by his now widow, what do you want to do with the newspaper if something happens to you in the hospital, Fred? And he said, call Steve. And so he did. He called me, and I said, I don't really have a lot of experience with this journalism stuff. I wrote a column for my college newspaper once about the Irish bar crawling in St. Patrick's Day, really so I wouldn't have to stand in line, and then let it go for the next 25, 30 years. But then I did take over the Mill Creek View, small town, hometown newspaper, created a website, created a podcast, and then moved to Tennessee and rebranded it as the HeartlandJournal.com to cover the entire country for the news that I realized doing journalism, the left-wing mainstream media just wouldn't cover. So that's where you'll find news that those stories that need to be heard are not being heard, especially if they have repercussions in all 50 states. But they don't want you to know that in LA or New York, or DC, where the big media outlets are. So I filled in the gap.
And that's exactly why I jumped at the chance to get you on as a guest on my show, because that's what I do here. Look, my profession is the profession of arms, blowing things up and hurting people and killing people and breaking their things and everything. I had no idea that I would be in the media business as weak of an income as that is. But in the media business,
is there income? I didn't know.
No, there's not any income. There's revenue only, and then none of it turns into income.
That's right. I agree.
But the facts are the facts, and the media has stopped putting the facts out. So here I am, and I appreciate you coming on. Well, let's talk about rogue judges. What are you guys writing about these rogue judges? I tell you, man. As somebody that's sworn an oath to give his life for the U.S. Constitution, I've read it multiple times. I carry a copy of it with me. I had an uncle that served in the Air Force that in his casket when he died last year, his pocket Constitution, worn out, was in his shirt pocket. So we read the thing, and these judges really are trespassing on the enumerated powers of the presidency.
I don't think they have read it. A lot of them have been exposed to have never been judges before their appointment, so they were activists. Some of them were not even born in America, although that is not a constitutional obligation. That is for president. But we don't know where their loyalties really are, whether they be from, say, Castro's communist Cuba. And so what their training in law is just not what we would expect from, say, a Harvard or even an LA law judge with prior work experience in law, or even an attorney. So just today, A new one is on the roster. About 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I wrote a column every Friday I do at theheartlandjournal.com. You can see it under the journal entries tab about the roster of judges who are basically stepping in and trying to obstruct Trump from doing what he was given a mandate to do by getting reelected with the popular vote. And so they've turned to the judges because they couldn't do it by the district attorneys in New York. They couldn't do it in Florida with the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. They couldn't do it with all the lawfare that they had invented over the last 16 years. So now it's time for the judges who have been put there by Obama and Biden to basically do anything they can to stop things, like they did in his first term to some extent with, say, what they called the Muslim ban from a judge in Hawaii. But it wasn't really a Muslim ban, as you know. It was just a lot of countries that happened to have a majority or even just a large minority of Muslims from those countries, but they were terrorists. It was an anti-terrorism move. But just today, there's a new one that I get to add to the roster. A Biden judge named Jamal Whitehead, Seattle University grad and University of Washington, ordered Trump to admit 12,000 refugees into our country. Well, why a small-time circuit judge thinks he can get away with that is because the chief of them all, Roberts, is letting him. As will all the judges above him and his local DA and AG of Washington State, who's now governor. And it was judges like that that threw those roadblocks at Trump in the first term, and they learned that they could do it and get away with it. Bob Ferguson, the new governor, former AG of Washington State, sued Trump administration 99 times at taxpayers' expense. No wins, but obviously bogged down the Justice Department, which is responsible for him, making it all that much harder. I can go down the list of all these judges if you're interested, sir. From Judge Royce Lamberth blocking the dismantling of the United States Agency for Global Media. Judge Indira Talwani said Trump could not end President Joe Biden's parole program that let 500,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela into the country. Normally not the domain of judges to weigh in on, but here they are. John Woodcock Jr., Edward Chen, Stephanie Gallagher said the Trump administration must facilitate the return of a suspected gang member from El Salvador who was deported. William H. Orrick, Judge Benjamin Settle, and Anna Reyes said the Defense Department had to allow people who identify as transgender in the military. Just today, the Supreme Court of all places threw that one out, but the three justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown, said they would allow the lower court to stand in that, which means, what the heck? Who put them there and why? And of course, we all know Judge James Boasberg now. He's a household name. Paula Zinnis, and let's just say two more. Colleen Collar-Cottley and Judge Amir Ali said the Trump administration could not put a blanket pause on foreign aid funding. Now, since when does a judge do that?
Exactly. Where does this concept of lower district judges being able to put a nationwide injunction on the executive branch, where does that come from? We all grew up in the same country. We've seen
that was the first Trump administration. That's when they allowed for the Muslim ban, as they called it, to be enjoined by a judge, and then it was followed up, and they just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And the people who were supposed to be the checks and balances on these judges, which would be attorney generals or governors or Supreme Court justices of the United States, didn't stop them. So they just kept going and going and going. And now we're seeing it on steroids. And none of this is the job of a judge. But Biden and Obama, with assist by looking the other way from John Roberts, is making Trump's popular vote mandate harder, and they are unelected, most of them.
Oh, yeah. Well, is there anything to stop the president from directing Pam Bondi, the attorney general, from issuing a finding that says, hey, these judicial actions are direct interference and contrary to the Constitution in Article 2, and they're unconstitutional?
No, I wish they would. And Congress is there with the Republican control of the Judiciary Committee in both the Senate and the House. Jim Jordan and Lindsey Graham, they're on vacation most of the time of those first 100 days of Trump, 80 or so days of it. I mean, many of these judges issue these rulings have very strong ties to the Democratic Party. Boasberg's wife, for example, Elizabeth Monson, has been involved in partisan politics forever, donated over $11,000 to Democratic candidates, but the Republicans, even now in the majority, they're not doing anything that I can see. I mean, for all I know, there's grand juries going on. Those are secret, but it sure doesn't look like it. And by the way, Royce Lamberth was appointed by Reagan, so proving that party really doesn't matter when it comes to ideology in 2025, and a little bit of Trump derangement syndrome, just not letting the powerful presidency do its job, thinking that these Obama, Biden, Schumer judges can stop it. But this is not new in American history, as you probably know. You go back to Andrew Jackson, and he literally said, it's your law, you enforce it. I'm going to do what I'm going to do as president, upholding my constitutional authority. You try and get away with yours, John Marshall, who was the greatest Supreme Court justice of all time, supposedly, who created the fourth branch. It wasn't even supposed to be that way. So to answer your question, sorry if I'm ranting, it just makes me very bothered because I like the letter of the law. I don't like rogue judges going rogue. There's going to be a constitutional crisis, and it's going to come down to Roberts and Trump, and who's the bigger guy, who's stronger, to make the presidency back to a strong executive, or are we going to be ruled by judges like in the Old Testament? And that didn't work out so well, even for Samson.
And it's not working out well in countries where that's being allowed, quite frankly, that are not the United States of America, Steve. You know, it's absolutely crazy. And I'd like to see some actual action come out of Jim Jordan in his Judiciary Committee. And I haven't seen it and didn't see much of it in the first Trump administration either. And that's unfortunate. We also got to work on our primary system here on the Republican side anyway.
Well, the Republicans have repealed the 11th commandment, right? They all attack each other today instead of getting rid of Democrats who are in the minority, but they follow their lead. And so even one of the radicals arrested last night at the University of Washington is an attorney. His name is Sam Suka with the King County Public Defender's Office. So we not only do we have judges who are acting badly and dealing with lawfare, we've got attorneys and public defenders that are on the other side that just don't want to follow the constitutional separation of powers and let the executive do what the executive does from his branch.
Well, the other side has said very often, it's just a piece of paper. Why do we have to do anything with it? We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll go to our next subject because I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that, having learned more about the journal and what you guys do there. We'll be right back with Steve Abramowitz of the heartlandjournal.com.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Alex Wong is the Deputy National Security Advisor serving under Michael Waltz. He is also an assistant to President Donald Trump. And if you're following my reports, then you'll see that Alex Wong is one of the individuals who was in this Signal chat that Michael Waltz is now taking responsibility for setting up. But if you look at the Signal messages, it clearly says that, oh, Alex Wong is my deputy and I put him in charge with making sure that everybody gets in this chat. And the controversy is how a leftist reporter by the name of Jeffrey Goldberg, who works for a hostile anti-Trump publication known as The Atlantic, was able to get added to this top secret chat with intel officials and key administration officials. And it's now quite an embarrassment to the Trump administration. So here's the tweet I posted the other day, in case you haven't seen it. Alex Wong, he's Chinese, by the way, so I don't really know who's doing the vetting. Again, All I know is that I'm not doing the vetting. Okay. All I know is that I am not responsible for the vetting of the Trump administration. Because if I was involved in vetting, things like this would not be happening. Okay. So again, I don't know why we have Chinese individuals in positions of national security in the Trump administration. Maybe that's a question for Michael Waltz. I don't know, but it's concerning. It's definitely very concerning.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Tuesday, and my guest today is Steve Abramowitz of the HeartlandJournal.com, the CEO and editor of there out of Tennessee, as a matter of fact. Steve, welcome back. Look, I don't know what you think about Laura Loomer, but I've been observing her and have actually interviewed her a couple of times on my show over the years. And when she's doing research and has her research team on it, she comes out with some very truthful and startling facts that usually scares everybody half to death. Now, I don't go into the whole, this is a Chinese guy. The guy's a Chinese American, folks. But still, the fact is what the guy's background is and his wife's background and all that. That's just one example. She's come up every couple of days. Laura's coming up with new names that are being named and appointed or trying to be appointed by the president and his team. And there is a vetting crisis in the White House, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And I have not had the honor of interviewing her yet. I hope to. I think she does do great work because she basically doesn't. We love lovers of truth, is what I always say on the opening of my show. And she will go where the information takes her and not be shut down, as we have seen many of the mainstream folks absolutely will, or just look away. And one of the problems I believe that we're seeing right now, and I was worried about this even before Trump won re-election, is who was going to be there to support his agenda? Would there be MAGA Republicans in Congress and the Senate to actually help him? And the answer is no. And so she's been very good at pointing that out. So, for example, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, a red state, is up for re-election next year, but he said he will not support Ed Martin for U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. Ed Martin is the kind of person that you would vet and say, yes, he should come into the government and help us find the bad guys, expose the dirt, get the deep state cleaned out, these Aesop stables, and Laura would be right on board with that. But no, the Senate won't allow it. So that's just the first 100 days. Watch what's going to happen over the next 1,300 of Trump's term, or likely faster over the next 365 days when the midterms come and the Democrats expect to take back the majority. All of this will be for naught. It'll be washed away because these are executive orders that Trump's been able to do. They haven't codified it in the Congress to make this law, just like he's been able to undo Biden stuff. The next person will undo Trump stuff if they get a chance. So it has been crazy. Just bear with me 1 second. Maybe Trump doesn't care about this type of stuff, these little minutiae in the rear departments, but personnel is policy. You know this. So when he nominates a gal like Dr. Jeanette Neshawat, I think is how you say it, the sister-in-law of now fired NSA chief Michael Walls, Dr. Jeanette, she couldn't tell the difference between in a malpractice suit against her in New York, allegedly misdiagnosing an object under someone's fingernail, and couldn't distinguish between an infection and a foreign body. At HHS with Bobby Kennedy, you got a bunch of Biden holdovers. For example, Ms. Stephanie Speeder, she was named deputy chief of staff to Kennedy. That's a big job. She's founder of EcoWatch, not a MAGA, or I should say Make America Healthy Again organization, and a real Trump hater in Will Ruger, a Koch ally gets to work under DNI Tulsi Gabbard. That's what everyone blames VP Pence for, his connection with Koch to be anti-MAGA. So we're just repeating the same thing with personnel. I could say more if you want. I mean, Ashley Bondoc, she helped ICE detainees file asylum complaints against ICE. So that could hurt Tom Homan, who's been actually working night and day to deport gangbangers. She's assistant to Stanley Woodward. He's a new pick for associate attorney general next to Bondi. Of the Epstein files are on my desk office any minute now. Why is a woman that helped criminal aliens now in the Department of Justice?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say about Mr. Woodward, when I saw the reporting on that, I've interviewed a lot of January 6 folks, and he really has helped a lot of January 6 folks in his job as a defense attorney. So we have to point that out. But I'm glad you brought up the senators, because one of the things that I'm finding is that Senate staffers for some of the let's call them more establishmenty folks, maybe neocon warmonger type folks, are getting positions under these political appointees, and they're not going to fight for things like President Trump's approach to peace through strength and wanting to end wars instead of start them.
No.
That's one of the things I'm very concerned about, and I've seen some of the names.
And they're not going to help Robert Kennedy either. And they're not going to help Tulsi Gabbard. And they're not going to help any of the people that are there with a mandate to clean house. And so when I see them appoint these folks, it just sort of reminds you, because I've been taught, remember the names, that is promoting the deep state. That's not exposing or getting rid of the deep state. It's making that shallow state all that much more shallow.
Yeah, we saw, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the FBI move to promote the guy that was the lead strategist for the January 6th manhunt.
When you mentioned Jan 6, I thought of that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same type of thing. What do you think is driving that, Steve?
Politics. I mean, the way these folks horse trade all the time, they're always trying to put their people in a position of power so that they can affect policy and have it made it their way. And sometimes it's corporate cronyism, sometimes it's lobbyists, sometimes it's family members of politicians. And we just saw this recently with the judge from New York State who was going after Trump with all kinds of exotica. But it turns out his own daughter was making millions from Democratic lobbyists. So you just never know. But the important thing to know is, like you mentioned Laura Loomer, vetting. You have to know who they're married to, who their kids are, like a Hunter Biden type, where brother James and son Hunter are the ones actually doing the arm's length transactions. But big guy Biden is the one taking 10% because, of course, what else does he have to sell but his office? I mean, we went through this in our lifetimes. Teapot Dome. It goes on and on with the politicians always trying to look out for not only their constituents, but sometimes their self. And that's where it gets really difficult, especially when you see things like $1 trillion of Social Security money shoveled out the door in the last 48 hours of Biden's administration. That's probably not helping senior citizens in Delaware, especially when you find out that the money was going to 160-year-olds and beyond outside of this country in foreign countries. So it's Doge has been amazing, mostly for shining the microscope on this, but you need a judiciary committee, and you need law enforcement, and you need the FBI, and you need the Department of Justice, and you need the NSA and all the rest of them to enforce those laws, or else they'll just keep going and saying, yeah, now what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, exactly. My specialty is the Department of Defense and the intelligence agencies. That's where my background leads me. So I watch that relatively closely, and Secretary Hegseth I think he's doing a really good job from a policy and orders direction and a directive perspective. But I think his team it's not all built yet. That's part of the challenge with the new administration is getting everybody in place when there's over 4,000 appointments to make in a relatively short period of time. Like just yesterday, he announced that he's going to cut the general officer and admirals down by at least 20% initially, and then another 10% a little bit after that. So a 30% cut in that, which is something us professionals have been calling for a long time, because they haven't won any wars. Is the bottom line. They keep losing. So
when I did my 100-day grading for the administration, Hegseth, who's also from Nashville, I've met him, but I can't call him a friend. I gave him an A, because I think that the real litmus test, the real grading scale was recruitment. And was recruitment, after many, many years of decline, was it going back up? And the answer is yes. So people want to be war fighters. They want to work for him. However, and he was able to win the successful banning of the trans in the services, because I believe that was hurting DEI was hurting morale. It was also hurting a lot of, we saw the crash of the Black Hawk helicopter in DC. They were just not, it wasn't a meritocracy, and it needed to be. So he's concerned about that. He's concerned about physical fitness. One of the things that I found very interesting about Pete, because he wrote a book about this, and Dan Bongino, now Deputy Dan at the FBI, he also wrote several books, and so they already told us what they were going to do, and I think that had a lot to do with how they got their job out of the blue anyway, because he was not a colonel or a general or somebody that would normally take over the DOD, but he's come in there with this MAGA agenda on the biggest budget we've got. And so I think when I said earlier that I don't think Trump really cares about the minutia of who's the assistant secretary to this or that, he does care about our military. And so the VA, as well as our all the money we left behind in Afghanistan, and the most embarrassing moment ever of that withdrawal that we did from Afghanistan, things of that nature, I don't think we're going to have on Trump's watch under Pete Hegseth. And so that's a very, very good thing. And so I'm very happy that we do have a patent-minded commander-in-chief again, as opposed to one that really, checked his watch at the funerals, just didn't really ever in his entire 40-year history in elected office care much about our troops, although he would always say, God bless our troops, but I don't even know how he feels about God, to be honest with you. So long story short, I think Pete Hegseth has been one of the shining stars of the first 100 days, because our military is probably our most important role of a government, is, to serve and protect. And so A+ for Pete Hegseth, and Trump for picking Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, I think so too. What I'm concerned about is places like the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness team. When I see Senate staffers and congressional staffers as his chief of staff in that area, and they're trying to get people from the COVID vaccine mandate back in, and every order they issue has more problems than it has solutions. And it's pointed out by the people that were harmed, and not the right things are happening. So it tells me there's a disconnect there, and we got to get all these nominees in to position to take care of that business, because their staffs are still resistors. I'll just say it out loud right now, Pete. If you ever come across the staff in USD PNR is resisting.
And that is what the deep state technically is. And what we were able to see when they released the Kennedy files, finally, after 50 something years, is that the intelligence community as a whole has all been very much co-opted to be a set aside from Trump's MAGA agenda. They tried to kill the guy twice. So what we're seeing is the deep staters that you're talking about are still there. And the hope is that the people who make the decisions see that, know this, or Laura Loomer will tell them, or they'll read my stuff and they'll hear about it, and ignore those voices and go with what the boss says. And his instincts have been pretty good in the last 4 years and 100 days that he's been president. So that's the hope, and they don't get their ears whispered into by some ambassador from Ukraine like last time, or a Vindman who was able to drive the impeachment thing because somebody fell for it. And that's why that one guy who I mentioned earlier was let go. He had a very cushy, high profile job, and they said, sorry, Mr. Walls, you got to go be ambassador to something else, because we're onto you. We know that you were put here by people who didn't have our best interests in mind, aren't America first, and we're going to find somebody else who is. If now the hard part, the first 100-day honeymoon is over, the Senate has to confirm these people. They're maybe not as on board, thinking that it never gets better than the first 100-day honeymoon, and now he's a lame duck and he can't run for office again. So they're back to their old ways. It's gonna be up to some serious people to do some serious things, which is why I always said Attorney General is the #1 pick for Trump in the second term, because that's the person, whether it be Matt Gaetz or now Pam Bondi or whoever's next, that has to actually lock some people up and punish them for bad behavior, or otherwise they'll just get more of it.
Yeah, we lost a good one in Matt Gaetz. In the next segment, we're going to talk about the FBI. I mean, you could throw in the DOJ there too, because there's a lot of frustration building. I'm watching it online. I'm connected with a lot of the folks that are watching that very, very closely, and it is building. So we'll be right back with Steve Abramowitz of the heartlandjournal.com here, talking about news of the day and all the issues that are popping out of the woodwork.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world. And it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus, you're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent, you're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because he, from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
I'm going to go back and harp on what I harped on this morning. We're burning daylight. You need a massive restructuring of the administrative state and the and a eradication of the deep state. Eradication of the deep state. I haven't seen any names come out of the CIA being investigated. Haven't seen anybody perp walked out of the CIA. Are you kidding me? Given what the CIA's done over the last 4 years, over many decades, but particularly the last 4 years under Biden, or the FBI, or the Justice Department, and there's not mass firings, there's not mass arrest, there's not a fundamental, put the fear of God in them, restructuring. The same intensity we're bringing to the law firms, the same intensity you're bringing to the universities, the same intensity you're bringing to the broadcast media and cable, and there is intensity and purpose and intention.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest today is the CEO and editor of the HeartlandJournal.com, Steve Abramowitz, up in Tennessee now for its national coverage. And Steve, Bannon there is he's pointing out what we're all seeing. And you mentioned Will Ruger in the last segment about vetting being one of the deputy DNIs for Tulsi Gabbard. And this gets right to the heart of the issue. The MAGA base is losing patience, especially with the FBI. And I think the Department of Justice and the FBI go hand in hand there. But that intelligence agency linkage is also a piece to this, too. So I think Steve Bannon put it quite well there, didn't he?
Yeah. He thinks like me. But he's a veteran. So I think the first 100 days of Trump were a double-edged sword. He came in with Operation Warp Speed 2.0. No offense intended if anyone's vaccine injured, but they came in with Elon Musk and Doge, and they started looking under all the corners and finding all the money, all the wasted money. And they even created a little counter on the debt clock that showed how much they're saving by firing people and doing all this wonderful stuff. And that set the precedent of the tone of the administration that we all thought we worked for so hard for and prayed for during the campaign leading up to his, assassination attempt and then right into Inauguration Day. I remember how nervous people were leading up to Inauguration Day, that is he going to make it? Are they going to blow up the entire White House? Like, there was some serious panic going on that we weren't going to get our agenda filled by some unforeseen circumstance. Well, he got there and they did that. But then they gave us the old hook. And that's when Pam Bondi said, I've got the Epstein files on my desk. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to bring some conservative influencers to the White House. I'm going to give them a binder full of it. And here we go. Get ready for frog marches and perp walks and arrests and arrests and arrests. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, wait a minute. I didn't really get everything. It's over there in this FBI dorm that we never heard of before. They're going to bring it all over in a truck. Just a second. They're going to give us a truck. And then another week goes by. And, Dan Bongino's not here yet. He has to be approved and he's got to wrap up his show. And I know he's been telling you for 2,000 episodes, follow the money, remember the names, and 3 books full of everybody's name from Lisa Monaco on down. We're going to just go get them. Oh, well, the wheels of justice are slow. Hold on. And then yesterday, Representative James Comer believes the Epstein files no longer exist. Diddy's trial started today with names like Michael B. Jordan, not the basketball player, and Mike Myers, not the Halloween hockey mask killer from the movies, but also Michael Bloomberg, Kamala Harris's name is there. What? So my contention is that the patience has run out day one, because remember, Kash Patel said they were going to turn the FBI into a museum for deep state actors day one and spread them all out around the country. Well, they have been making arrests around the country. Sometimes I'm questioning if that's really the job of the FBI and not the local sheriff or ICE. But okay, fine, do that. But it's still there and it's day 101. So Pam Bondi is his boss. Dan Bongino works for Cash. That's the chain, but those are the ones who are out front, like Elon Musk, saying, watch us work, watch us do this, let us be transparent. We'll put up or shut up. Well, they haven't put up. And they tricked us into thinking they were gonna show up 30 days in. It's now 101 days in. So
Important
forgive me
security
for losing my
message.
patience, but I spent
Your computer has been locked
2,000
up.
hours with Dan Bongino.
Your IP address was used without your knowledge or consent to visit websites that contains identity theft virus.
Podcast on Dan and his tips on follow the money, remember the names, QT time is over, ring the bell, you name it. And now he gets into the government and he is technically a Fed. So all the talk about the feds being bad, he's one of them. Well, a deep state is really just a euphemism for somebody who works in the government, a bureaucrat. He's one of them, and he has to show us that he's a different breed. And we can't wait a long time because evidence is being destroyed. People are leaving the country. There's a few of them that moved to the UK and Ireland that we all knew, high profile, that he used to talk about all the time. The patience wasn't there to begin with. We took a breath because we figured, okay, get him in there, let him look around, find out where the coffee maker is, where's the executive bathroom, and then go open your book, chapter 4. Let's just arrest those 3 and let them defend themselves with an attorney in front of a judge instead of, make the case and then go get them. Well, here we are talking about it still, and then none of those cases have been made. And now the Diddy trial is going on. So he made it through. He hasn't been Epstein. He's going to actually testify. And names have been named. The FBI didn't do it. The court of law did it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the frustrations that I hear all the time is and Dan's I consider him a friend. We've shared the stage before together as political candidates and rallies and those kind of things. So look, I'm a believer. I think he's as honest as the day is long. But you can only put the tweet out and say, hey, here's what's going on. I can't talk about everything. You can only do that for so long. Even the president of the United States today, this morning, Steve, I saw a clip of him say something about one of the agencies. Well, we can no longer say this was Biden's issue. The folks that I have running the government now, it's time to lean forward and lean into this because now it's our issue. I mean, that's really where we're at here in First of May after a January 20th inauguration, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually quite much of a leadership general commander-in-chief thing to say, because Biden spent 4 years saying it was Trump's fault, and Obama spent 8 years saying it was George Bush's fault, everything from economy to wars to you name it. Whereas Trump's saying like, hey, 100 days was the old guy's act. Now it's us, blame us. And so that's good because that'll motivate these folks down below him to say, ooh, it's on me now. I actually have to do something. I can't pass the buck and say, oh, it's Pete Buttigieg's fault that the trains fell over. They're my fault now. So I think that's fantastic. But again, Dan is in a unique position because he took a $4 million pay cut, right? They said that he was going to do this. So he goes into government being altruistic. I'm not in it for the money. I'm not in it for the pension. I'm in it to fix things. And I've got these 3 books that have been published that I bought. Somebody bought them and he made a little money on it. He didn't get rich on it, but he did it. That actually have the names. Right. So if he doesn't now say, just like in chapter 18 of my book, Follow the Money, I'm arresting George Soros, Bill Gates, and this person, this was on the account of, and here's the case. Literally his first book called Spygate they were case files. Every chapter was like a case file. So it's done. You just needed an actual prosecutor to actually do it. And if that doesn't happen in the next 100 days, let's just say, we're going to all have to question what in the world is Dan Bongino, the guy that we loved and admired and listened to and bought his books and bought his t-shirts and tuned in every day for an hour. or 3 if you listen to his radio show. Do we waste our time? Who was he really? What is this? Who were his sources in the Secret Service that would always tell him, we know this, we know that, we know this? Were those deep state actors tricking him, making us all fall for the old mouse trap, with the cheese? We don't know yet. Incomplete. We'll see. But, and like you said, I love the guy. I spent hours listening to that guy in my headphones, walking the dog and all the rest in the rainy Pacific Northwest before doing all of this. And I want him to be like Tombstone. I want him to be like Val Kilmer in Tombstone and come in there and say, justice is coming. But we don't have indefinite amount of time because political capital is being wasted every day towards the midterms. And we don't have a lot of patience because some of these people really were bad. And remember Jim Comey got his house raided and they took a bunch of top secret stuff out of there and he gave his friend at the New York Times a lot of that. That's a federal offense. We don't have to have a long drawn out case made like Al Capone to put him away or at least fine him or some kind of take away his law license. I don't know. It's there's a lot of clear cut stuff out there that they could have already done. I guess we call it low hanging fruit, just to show that we're still in Operation Warp Speed 2.0 and the government is on the mend.
Yeah, you mentioned Dan's books or each chapter's like case files. There's a starting point right there. But we're having trouble getting Ed Martin confirmed because of an intransigent Republican senator, Tom Tillis from North Carolina. Folks in North Carolina, you need to primary that guy. He's been a problem in several confirmations, but why not just start there? Hey, Deputy Director Bongino, go into Director Patel's office and say, hey, here are the initial case files. I want to assign this.
But they're not all necessarily have to be done in DC. A lot of these people lived in Virginia, so you just go down there and you subpoena a grand jury down there. They're Florida, where Trump Mar-a-Lago is. They did things there like raid Mar-a-Lago. You can just file it down there. You don't need to wait around for Tom Tillis or Mitch McConnell to approve somebody in 2 years. You could get the district attorneys and the governors right now to do these things. I had Ivan Reichland on my show a couple times, twice actually. Love him or hate him, the guy is pretty smart. And he basically said, all you really need is county sheriffs, because every single county that they committed these acts in, you can make a case that is punishable by law. It's like Al Capone going down for tax evasion, not all the murder and mayhem that he created. Well, if that's what it takes to make Antifa domestic terrorists by just doing it in Idaho, and then prosecuting them in Washington in that District 9 Circuit Court, fine. We don't need, they don't all have to walk into DC under Boasberg. They can be just by being Americans in an American jurisprudence jurisdiction. We can see some justice. And I think that's what you and I are both really talking about is where's the justice? Why did Dan give up his radio show, go to DC, put a tie on, and to lose that revenue for him and his family for maybe nothing? I don't believe it, but I'll see.
I don't believe it either. I think he did it based on what he was asked to do, and he probably asked questions about, here's what I need in order to do this. I can't just go in and be some figurehead here. I have to be able to take action.
And those books were defenses of Trump. So Trump probably read those books, or at least got synopsis of them, and said, bring Dan on. He knows what we're doing.
Yeah.
But then you have to say, all right, well, who's blocking that?
Somebody's
not just the Judiciary Committee that oversees the Justice Department, but somebody at the Justice Department is saying, yeah, Dan, settle down, sit down, relax. We're going to do this at our pace. And that's the question is your pace reverse? Is it neutral? Is it 1 mile an hour? Or are we going to go back to warp speed?
Exactly. Well, we got to take our last break, Stephen. We come back. We'll talk about one of my favorite subjects, money laundering by political parties, mainly the Democrat Party. But I want to get your opinion on something that we learned in the USAID investigation from Doge and Elon Musk. We'll be right back with Steve Abramowitz, CEO and editor of the HeartlandJournal.com.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com.
Meanwhile, President Trump is directing the Justice Department to investigate Act Blue. This is a Democratic donation platform, and the focus as the allegations about illegal straw donors and foreign contributions. Mark Meredith is live in Washington with more. This has been brewing for a while, Mark. What do we need to know?
Dana, for years, you're right about this, but this is a big development. The White House is directing the Attorney General to investigate the Democratic Party's top fundraising platform. It's called Act Blue, and the president says he wants to know if foreign money is being donated to the group and then utilized to sway elections. Democrats are calling this probe a dangerous abuse of power. Act Blue is an enormous operation in Democratic politics. It's raised more than $16 billion since 2004. You may have seen the text pop up from candidates saying, please donate, go to the Act Blue website. Republicans use something similar called Win Red. There was a new memo signed on Thursday directing the Attorney General to investigate if foreign nationals are using the Act Blue platform to bypass campaign finance laws. Trump wants a report out in 6 months.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Tuesday. It's Training Tuesday, and boy, are we learning some great things today. My guest is the editor and CEO of the HeartlandJournal.com and the host of the Heartland Journal podcast, Steve Abramowitz. Steve, we could do a week's worth of 1 hour shows each day, probably 8 1 hour shows each day on this, especially since Doge and Elon Musk broke that USAID story, and it's just cascaded from there. But this Act Blue issue, it's been around a lot longer than even the second Trump administration. We've known about this for a long time. Why isn't something happening with it?
Yeah, that lead in that you just said, they said a dangerous abuse of their abuse of power, right? I mean, that's really what it is. So Act Blue took over where FTX left off, right? Fake money became credit card fraud because they had this special little service where instead of using the 3-digit code on the back of everybody's credit card, they said, oh, you don't even need that. So they just started taking $10, $15, $20 a month from people who may have donated 100 years ago. Or I know a guy from North Carolina who never gave anywhere and was giving in Kentucky, and he's from North Carolina. So they were basically identity theft and committing fraud, knowing full well that they needed all that money for Kamala real quick, $1 billion in under, 90 days of a campaign, because Biden quit, to fill those coffers. And FTX was gone. Blankenfield Fryen, whatever his name is in jail, so they couldn't use him. And then, of course, the USAID and foreign aid has been around for a long, long time. Actually, Obama's mother worked at USAID, and that used to go to governments, but came back into elected Democrats' campaign coffers. Now it looks like that was directed by George Soros, while Biden and Dems were in control the last 4, 8, 16 years. So it turns out George didn't need to even use his own money, but directed our own taxpayer money to do damage to our own country. Still going on in Washington and Oregon. This week on the college campuses, after they ran out of Tesla dealerships to burn, all the colleges are heavily funded by NIH and Department of Education, which is still there, by the way, another thing that's not shuttered on day one. Although Harvard was just told, don't even apply for grants anymore because you're violating the new Trump rules. But there's many more to go. UNC and Wisconsin, they're the ones that did the gain of function research, and Trump just outlawed that again, which is what Obama did, which forced Fauci and his friends offshore. But the Department of Energy money recycles into unions, which spends 99% on electing Dems. So that money just washes around DC like a laundromat over and over since Carter invented it. And Reagan, very next president, is the one that promised to get rid of it. But it's still there, the Department of Education. So hopefully another promise finally will be kept by Trump before he's through, like the embassy to Jerusalem last time. But Republicans have to stop being on vacation and codify these things. And that's what Act Blue stepped in to fill the gap, was where are we going to get real fast campaign money for a party that can't sell any ideas at the ballot box.
Yeah, and I think when you connect that to what we learned with the USAID thing, I don't know if you followed Data Republican or not, but I started following her once that broke. This whole concept of this whole NGO, the National Endowment of Democracy, that has two NGOs underneath it that split. I mean, they each get about $135 million a year. One is the International Republican Institute, and the other one's the Democrat version of that. I want to investigate more into those tentacles that Data Republicans putting together, these AI reporting functions and those kind of things, because I say that that's how the uniparty establishment parties have been able to maintain power, is somehow through those mechanisms.
Oh yeah,
They're laundering
no,
that
there's
money.
I've had rumors that Win Red was participating as well, not as huge as the other one, Act Blue, but they can get away with it too. It's really just a fee-based money laundering operation, because they take in the money and they give it to whichever candidates they want. It doesn't even designate who you wanted it to go to. They don't have to. It's just the rules of it. So, but it all ties into the university industrial complex, right? So these colleges are mostly in blue cities and states, and they employ mostly liberals because they pushed out all the conservatives, like Victor David Hanson. He's like one of the last ones left. I don't even know why Hoover at Stanford still has him there, but he's there. And they elect these Democrats time and time again, no matter how bad the streets get, how bad test scores for their kids are, no matter anything. So that's how you get an Elizabeth Warren and Patty Murray from Washington, who's been there 30 years with nothing good to show for it. But the endowments are huge in the billions, yet we still give them money when Democrats control the purse strings. And how Biden was able to raid Social Security and Medicare, like I said, the lock boxes for Green New Deal cronies to the tune of trillions. And Dodgy has saved us about 300 billion, it says, but we spend over $1 trillion on interest alone. So we got a ways to go to get into that 36 trillion of debt principle to actually get this country back on its fiscal footing again. But the politicians don't seem to care about that, because they just passed a law codifying for this year Biden level spending for the new year under Trump. So those are Republicans, right? So the problem is they all have a vested interest in money in politics. It's just a fact. Sometimes that's all they really care about. Some of them go into Congress with $5,000 of credit card debt, come out with $100 million like Nancy Pelosi. It's
amazing.
We just aren't. It's not the Vatican. We're not made up of archbishops and popes. We have a bunch of humans, sinners, flawed as can be, that get up there and realize, hey, I can trade stocks. That's cool. I'll do that. And not so much about, oh, we're going to stop spending money on USAID, which recycles back into the dog catchers and the pothole fillers in my district.
Exactly. Well, we got a question from the live audience. Let's go ahead and take that before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Shell.
Uh-oh.
We have Liz, sir.
I'm easy on people. Hi, how you doing? I want to know, what can we, the public, do to hold these people accountable? Somebody has got to be rehiring people that were fired, basically. And I mean, do we need another Doge to go investigate these people? Each office?
Yeah, we need 4,000 Doges in every county in this country, and we need people like you to actually run for office, tell the truth in your campaign, get in there and vote accordingly, including school board, mayor's race, county council, city council, all the rest, because what we've gotten is a 50-year Republican Party that's split down the middle between the Fords and the Reagans, Reagan being the outsider, the populist. He technically lost the power base of the party, and we ended up with a bunch of Fords who are big business, big chamber of commerce, big military, big intelligence community, et cetera, et cetera. We need more folks like heartland believing patriots to actually do the work. And unfortunately, that takes time. But in a democracy, that's all we've got, because we don't want a dictator to come in, wrest control back for the little people, hand it over like Augustus, from Rome. We want every single county to play by the rules and clean it up. And that's where you're going to get a Washington State that's blue as can be and an Oklahoma that's red as can be. And until further notice, that's what we got to live with.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a great question, Liz. You know, the state level and local level of this stuff is critically important, even more so, in my opinion. The real battle, the war itself, to win that war, we have to win at the state level. You know, here in Mississippi, we have an auditor that calls himself the Mississippi Office of Government Efficiency. He just recently announced this morning that he's caught an NGO here that's getting money from the tax dollars that's supposed to be set up to do AIDS and HIV research to help folks in that area, and they're spending it to party. They're spending millions of dollars to go party in New York City, for God's sake. I live in Mississippi, dude. Why are people going to New York City to party? And I mean party at like Uber rides at 4 a.m, going to different bars. You know, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you see here, Steve, and it's incredible. And I agree with you. Go out and run for office. Look, I'm getting long in the tooth. I've run for office before, won 1 out of 4, but I'm thinking about doing it again because the state fight is so critically important. And man, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. Maybe we can make this a regular event where we do this because I would love it. Tell folks about your podcast, though. You mentioned you modeled it after Bongino's. We got about a little over a minute left. Let's talk about that real quick so folks know where to find you and we can support that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, always an interesting guest that's making a positive change in our community, lover of truth. That's sort of the litmus test as to how they get invited in the first place. And so I've had some amazing guests, everyone from Dr. Peter McCullough and Malone, Tenpenny, to actors and actresses and authors and politicians who I believe are on the right side of history and are willing to tell our audience, but aren't allowed on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox even. And so I'm there for them. And yes, I do it from middle of Tennessee, and it used to be the Mill Creek View Tennessee podcast, but we've broadened it out to so many other places. So I've had the Freedom Caucus members of Wyoming and South Carolina on, and I've had politicians from other states, senators from other states, and really just looking for that little encouragement to remind us what Liz just asked us is, isn't America still the greatest country on earth? And the answer is absolutely yes, but not if you look at DC all day long. If you sit home and watch CNN and you look at DC all day long, you're going to hate this country real fast. Don't do that. Listen to a podcast like mine. Look for the encouragement. Look for where Jesus was telling us that there's a better way to live, and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But in your own soul and spirit, look for the heartland. Look for the patriotism. Look for why America is so great, and literally the greatest country on earth that was founded on liberty. The only one to ever be like that. If we can keep it, let's be virtuous. Let's talk common sense, and let's make this country better.
Well, thanks, my friend. Keep up the great work. Tomorrow is Whistleblower Wednesday, and I've got David Pine, National Security Strategist, coming on board to discuss peace through strength, and we're seeing some cracks in the strategy, and a lot of us are very concerned. I'll see you then.